Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Rossi. Today we are going to use positive and negative space to create a collage. Let's get started. What you will be needing today is a white piece of paper. You can also use any colored piece of paper, that will work also. A black piece of paper, I cut mine into a small square. You're going to want to do that as well. It just needs to be smaller than your big paper with extra space around the edges. I have some crayons. I'm going to use watercolors today. If you don't have watercolor, you can use crayons or markers, and that will work just fine. I have a scissor, a glue stick, a pencil, and an eraser. Today we are making an image that shows positive and negative space based on the Japanese word notan, which is all about the relationship between light and dark. The idea behind Notan is creating an image that shows positive and negative space, showing that light and dark in a way that it balances one another. So our positive shapes are matching our negative shapes. And the way that we're going to do that is with both of our pieces of paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my black paper aside, and I'm going to use watercolors to add some color to my white paper. If you want to use a piece of colored construction paper, you don't have to do this step. If you don't have watercolors, you can use markers or crayons to add color to your paper. If you want to leave your paper white, it is still going to work. I just think adding some watercolor in the background is going to make it nice and bright and colorful. I'm just going to do an abstract design with my watercolors in the background. So I'm just going to take my colors and just block in different shapes. You can make any kind of abstract design you want. I wouldn't draw a picture or anything because we are going to cover some of this up with our black paper. So just focus on shapes and colors for your background. I'm not going to bring my colors all the way to the edge of my paper. I'm going to leave some white space. I just want to create some colors in the middle. So I added my watercolors mostly in the center of my paper, going out towards the edges. I left some white space around the edge of my paper, which is fine. I just focused on adding kind of like a tie-dye rainbow of colors in the middle of my paper, so it will be more interesting when I'm finished. I'm going to put this to the side so it can dry, and I'm going to take my black paper and get started on that. With my black paper, I'm going to grab a white crayon. Wow, do I not have a white crayon in this box? This box has 96 crayons and no white. That's crazy. Guess I can use a gray. For some reason my crayon box doesn't have white, so I'm going to use a gray crayon. That should still show up on here. You can use a white crayon, a white colored pencil, anything to show up on your black paper. You can even use your pencil if you don't have a white crayon or a white colored pencil. It will be a little tougher to see, but it will still be shiny, so you should be able to tell where your lines are. So now we're going to draw some shapes on our black paper to create our positive and negative space. So I'm going to draw 4 different shapes on each side, and I want to make sure I'm starting on one edge and I'm finishing on that same edge. I don't want to get too close to the middle because they might touch each other and we don't want them to touch, because that's going to make it very tricky to cut them out. You can draw any kinds of shapes you want, whether you want to draw organic or geometric shapes, it's up to you. I'm going to start by doing half of a heart shape. What we're going to end up doing is cutting these shapes out. So I will be cutting along this line and positioning it on this side, so it's going to make a full heart on my paper. I'm going to make another smaller heart-shaped line on the inside so I can have a double positive negative effect there. I'm just going to do a wiggly organic line down here, making sure I am starting and ending my line on the same half of my paper. On here I think I'm going to do a big round half circle, and I think I'm going to do 2 smaller lines in there. And on the last side I think I'll do a big triangle. And again, we don't want our lines for our shapes to touch. Now that I finished drawing my shapes, I'm going to grab my scissor and I'm going to cut out my shapes along the line. I want to be very careful to cut out my shapes with one cut all the way across my line. I'm not cutting these out in little tiny pieces because we're going to use all the different parts of our paper that we're cutting out. So I'm going to save all these pieces, making sure that I cut them out in one cut following my line. Okay, so my watercolor is dry. I have all of my pieces that I cut out. When you're drawing your shapes on your paper, it's important to remember that you're going to be cutting these out. So don't make them too crazy looking. Don't let your lines overlap too much. It's going to just be way too hard for you to cut out if you do anything like that. I'm going to arrange my black pieces of paper on the center of my white paper now. And I'm doing that by taking the pieces that I cut out, starting with my centerpiece, and arranging them to show positive and negative space. So the positive space is the area that is the shape, and then the hole where the shape was is going to be the negative space. When I'm lining these up, I want a symmetrical reflection of my shape. So I cut this triangular piece out from in here. So when I take it out, I'm going to flip it, making sure my corners are touching and lining it up on the outside. So now I have my positive piece that I cut out, and I have my negative shape of where I cut that piece out from. I'm going to do that in all of my sections. So I have my oval right here. I'm going to push that in. Now I cut a second smaller shape in my triangle, so that smaller shape is going to stay on the inside. So now I have a reflection going of positive shape, negative shape, positive shape, negative shape. And I'm going to do the same thing in my oval where I cut this piece out second. So I'm going to line that one up where it was. And then I actually cut an even smaller piece out from the middle, so I'm going to reflect that one back on this side. So we're creating a balance of our positive and our negative shapes, and you're able to see the colors that we painted with our watercolor right through our negative shapes to make a really pretty shape out of that space. There we go. Now that all of my pieces are laid out where I want them to be, I'm going to grab my glue stick and just glue them down on my paper, starting with my big piece, going around to all of my outside pieces, and then finally to my inside pieces. While I'm gluing, I want to make sure I line up those corners so they are touching, so my shape is fully split by the edge of my paper there to have positive on one side and negative on the other. And then also making sure that I flip-flop that relationship by having the negative shape on the outside and then the positive shape on the inside for the smaller pieces that I cut. And that is my Japanese Notan design all finished. So I have my positive and my negative shapes both balanced in my picture by the way that I cut them out and arranged them on my paper. You can make whatever kinds of shapes you want in your black paper and reverse them out onto the other side like that to show your positive and negative space, and you will end up with a great balanced image. When you are finished, be sure to take a picture of your project and share it with me on your Google Doc. Make sure that all of your projects that you have done so far during our remote learning also have photos up on your Google Doc so I can see them. Try your best, have fun, and get creative. Bye!